All right, so hello everyone. My name is Lita Carbone. I'm the Instructional Support Specialist at the College of St. Rose, and today we're going to be talking about avoiding Zoom fatigue. So first question is, have you experienced any of the following symptoms? Eye irritation, blurred vision, headaches, migraines? What about a lack of focus? Feeling like you can't get a word in during meetings? How about exhaustion or anxiety before or during Zoom calls? Well, congratulations, you have Zoom fatigue. You are what is called ausgezumt, which is the newest Yiddish word for exhausted or bored by Zoom. In short, you have what is being called Zoom fatigue. With the constant exposure to screens and Zoom calls, it's easy to see why you may be experiencing some of these symptoms. If you're experiencing these, so are your students. The best way for people to receive face-to-face communication is through apps like Zoom. What was once a great way for us to connect at the beginning of the pandemic has become a necessity to communicate and a part of every aspect of our lives. Everything from family Zoom calls, work meetings, classes, yoga or exercise classes, etc. These have all been done using video conferencing technology. So before we delve into the ways to combat Zoom fatigue, let's look at the why for Zoom fatigue. So in addition to Zoom taking up a lot of our lives, there is scientific evidence to support our Zoom fatigue. Audio, personal stressors, lack of rewards, cost trade-offs, missing nonverbal cues in communication, sitting down all the time, and a constant gaze from other users on Zoom calls all play a part in the cognitive drain that Zoom has. So with audio, the audio for Zoom calls isn't necessarily in real time. So there is a delay when people are speaking in a Zoom call. How many times have you and a coworker talked at the same time and had the awkward, oh no, you go ahead exchange? So also the quality of the audio can add to our fatigue. Low quality microphones or background noise can be draining to the other users on the call. Behind the screens, everything from finances, family stress, politics, and social injustice have been a constant in the back of everyone's minds. What will happen next has been an ongoing question we have been asking ourselves throughout the duration of the pandemic. Virtual multitasking. We are all guilty of looking at our phones or looking at an email quick during a Zoom call. However, this is taxing the brain's ability to focus on the meeting at hand. Because Zoom requires us to listen constantly, we don't get the opportunity to ask a colleague during the meeting to catch us up on what was just said, or unless we open another window to message them in the chat or text them. We also can't ask the speaker to repeat themselves before moving on like we normally would. Instead, we have to wait for a pause, and by that point, we've missed what was said entirely or the conversation has moved on. Lack of rewards, costs, trade-offs, and constant gaze. To simplify this concept, humans are social creatures. Our survival has relied on our ability to communicate and interact with one another. The benefits of social interaction are ingrained in our genetic makeup. Social interactions produce oxytocin. The more social interaction we have, the happier our brains are. Video conferencing platforms like Zoom has unconsciously made us more suspicious of others or enforces a negative perception of them. The cost of video conferencing is persistent and unclear eye contact through the webcam. Are they looking at me or are they looking at themselves to see if their hair is out of place? Across the animal kingdom, extended eye contact is seen as threatening because it correlates with the inevitable attack of a predator. We could meet with our family on Zoom for grandma's birthday, but cousin Eddie is giving us Bengal tiger vibes with his prolonged eye contact. So additionally, we are not used to seeing ourselves in conversation, so that is also confusing our brains on top of everything else. With nonverbal communication, to build off of the rewards and cost trade-offs, there is a lot of nonverbal communication that happens during social interactions. Touch and body posture help us understand context and tone when we communicate. Facial expressions and gestures help add to the context and tone of conversations. Subtle expressions can be missed entirely or misinterpreted because we're only seeing a portion of the person that we're talking to. So they're stuck in this little box that we're seeing. So sitting down all the time, it might sound strange, but physical activity reduces our fatigue. Quarantine has us sitting more than we used to, and it's no secret that sitting is the new smoking. Even substituting 30 minutes of sitting time with a physical activity can cut our risk of early death by up to a third, according to a study published in the American Journal of Epidemiology. So dead butt syndrome is a thing, so start doing squats. So next, let's talk about the pros and cons of online learning experience. Let's start with the pros. So there's flexibility for students to learn from anywhere, anytime, at any pace. It can suit multiple intelligences if done correctly. So providing multiple tools for students to learn the information in a clear and concise format with achievable goals. So having videos, audio, quizzes, presentations, etc. There's flexibility for creative teaching methods or experiments with your classes. There's also multiple ways to communicate with your students and more ways to deliver accountability opportunities for your students. So emails, discussion boards, quizzing, all of those. And let's talk about the cons. So technology equity and accessibility variations for both students and staff plays an impact on their online learning experience. So depending on where your students are living or what their home environment is, they might not necessarily have the best online learning experience. Computer literacy. Depending on your students' exposure to technology prior to their college experience, it will impact their success in your class. So technology cannot replace human interaction entirely. It's important to do check-ins with each of your students, but we'll get more into that later on. Not all curriculum is created equal in online format. I'm sure some of you have learned this with some of your courses. So that's one of the cons with online learning. Curriculum layout and implementation is not consistent across the board. So we all have our own teaching styles when it comes to what we're passionate about. And for students who need consistency because of learning needs, online learning can be a challenge if the syllabus isn't written in a concise manner, or if the quizzes or discussions are done in a different style, then that can impact your students' ability to learn in your class. So some ways to combat Zoom fatigue. Encourage your students to take notes using pen and paper to give themselves a break from the screen. This gives their eyes a break from the screen's harsh light. And speaking of your eyes, remember the 20-20 rule. So for every 20 minutes spent using a screen, look at something that is 20 feet away and focus on that for a total of 20 seconds. Don't work on other projects or tasks during given class or meeting time. Try to stay away from checking social media or adding that 10th pair of sweatpants to your cart on Amazon. Trying to focus on more than one task will tax your brain, as I mentioned earlier. Speaking of taxing your brain, be sure to give you and your students a body and brain break from the screen. So allow them time during class to stand up, walk around, or stretch, play interlude music, and have a timer on the screen. So for the participants in your Zoom meeting, they can also maximize their Zoom window and switch from gallery view to speaker view. They can also hide non-video participants to reduce the number of distractions and give their brains a chance to focus on the lecture. Providing asynchronous opportunities for students helps give students the ability to review and take their time with the material, and creating resources outside of class that are engaging. Checking in with your students is extremely important. I cannot stress this enough. It can be weekly, bi-weekly, or even monthly. They are going through a lot right now, and bridging the gap will make them more comfortable and confident that they made the right choice coming to St. Rose. I heard last week that mental health is going to be the next pandemic. So it's important that letting students know that we're here for them and that we want them to succeed. Allowing students to sign on early or stay 10 minutes after can help build those connections that we would normally have with in-person learning. It builds a more relaxed environment, and students can ask you questions about the material, It's also a great way and great time used for those check-ins that I mentioned previously. Instead of focusing on the lecture and reiterating information that is wrote to you, allow breaks in the lecture to ask the students questions or conduct polls in Zoom. You can do this throughout the time during class to keep the students engaged. It's also a great way to see if you have any Zoom runaways, if the number of poll submissions you do throughout the course or during duration of the class, if those submissions start to go down during the course, that's a good indicator that you have some Zoom runaways. Using breakout rooms and creating opportunities for group work is a great way for students to connect with one another. Presenting an agenda or action plan for that class with clear goals and talking points that will be covered during the class. Allow students some time to process the information by using the screen share function to showcase this at the beginning of class before it officially begins. Encourage students to take notes on first impressions or preliminary questions that they have. During the class, they can check off what was covered and circle what wasn't covered or what questions that they still have. Create opportunities for students to become engaged in the Zoom sessions using various roles. So having a designated note taker for that session, as well as a timekeeper. Have someone in your class be the agenda tracker to make sure that all the highlights are being addressed. It helps keep the students engaged and keeps them honest and keeps you honest as well. All right, so some activities to combat Zoom fatigue. Annotating documents with students using Zoom screen share function and annotation tools. You can create interactive documents for students to add notes or comments. So share with the students using the commenter option in Google Docs, or create SharePoint documents that students can edit. They can highlight and add comments directly to the document. So this is another instance of adding accountability for your students. So class debates about topics, a timer and mute button is recommended. Topics can be relevant to a current discussion that you're having in class, or it can be used as a fun warm-up activity. Virtual backgrounds to set a theme for the class. So step back in time with historical sites using your virtual backgrounds, or enter a museum gallery to promote or to prompt a discussion. You can also use games to provide fun breaks. So Kahoot is a trivia game that has options for your phone as well as your computer. It's used more often in elementary or middle school, but there are higher ed templates and the flexibility to create your own trivia games. You can also do online crosswords or word searches as mental warm-ups or midway point breaks during your classes. Creating a scavenger hunt for evidence to support an argument using course documents. So if you have the students break out into breakout rooms, they can, have a discussion topic where they need to find certain evidence using articles that you've shared, and they can discuss with each other, oh, I remember seeing it in this article or this article. So if you're familiar with the Tonight Show, there's the game Box of Lies, where someone is trying to guess what the person is talking about or describing. And you can use this with historical figures, or if you're teaching a Spanish class, you can use it for vocabulary language comprehension. And discussions on movies or podcasts related to course topics. There are a wide variety of podcasts out there besides murder mysteries. Select a particular episode for your students to listen to and use it as a jumping off point for your class. You can also conduct virtual tours with museums, historical landmarks, journaling with relaxing music at the beginning or end of your class as a reflection opportunity for the students with the lecture that they just listened to, or something else that they're building up towards as an acquired skill for your class. This one I really like. It's building an escape room for content or acquired skills from your course. You can use a website like Room Escape Maker, or you can use Google Forms. And this is a fun alternative to quizzing. This can either be done with the whole class, or it can be done in breakout rooms. it's a great way to see how students have retained the information and switches up the monotony of class. So what are your thoughts, and what are some activities or techniques that you've used to battle Zoom fatigue with your classes? So, and I do have some resources for you that I use with creating this presentation. And if you would like to see this slideshow or the notes that I use, feel free to reach out to me and I'll be happy to share this information with you.